It didn't start with a gavel or a big speech or even a warning. It started with a sound that snaps your jaw tight and makes a whole room forget how to breathe. A slap. Right there on the courthouse steps in Northbridge, sun bouncing off the stone like everything was normal. Papers lifted in the air like startled birds, my coffee shattered at my feet, and this officer with a chest full of borrowed courage leaned in so close I could smell the mint on his breath. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, voice low, like the hallway belonged to him. "I work here," I answered, steady one hand still on my briefcase. "I'm due upstairs by 9. He looked me up and down. No heels, no robe, no badge on a lanyard, just a navy blouse and flats, the kind of outfit that says I've got work to do. He scoffed. "Not through the staff entrance, you don't. I have identification," I said, and started to open my case. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, and then that sound again. His palm cracked across my cheek, and the whole atrium fell into that weird silence where people decide if they're witnesses or furniture. "My name is Naomi Pierce. I've walked those steps 1,000 times. Most days my name is etched in bronze outside courtroom 2B, the Honorable Naomi L. Pierce. But that morning I wasn't wearing the robe. I wasn't carrying the key. I wanted to see how the machine works when you walk through it unarmored. No title, just a person with paperwork and a deadline. Officer Brent Dwyer didn't see a person. He saw a problem. He grabbed my blouse, pinned me to granite so cold it stole my breath, hissed, "People like you don't stroll in like you own the place," and wrenched my arms behind my back until the cuffs bit bone. Another officer, Ortiz, younger, sleep still in his eyes, drifted over with his coffee and asked, "Careful, everything okay?" Dwyer didn't look up. Aggressive, non-compliant. "We're booking." They never checked my ID. They marched me through the metal detector like a message. My thermos leaked across the floor behind us, a little brown trail that said this actually happened. Holding looked like every holding cell from every cop show, flickering light plastic chair. The smell of old anxiety. I kept my back straight, my hands cuffed to the ring in the table, and stared at a spot on the wall until the door opened. "Defendant is ready," the bailiff mumbled. They walked me to a courtroom that wasn't mine. Judge Whitaker, good man cautious, recalled for the week, sat where I usually sit. The prosecutor, Sandra Bell, leafed through a thin file that had already decided who I was. Dwyer adjusted his collar like a man about to tell the story he practiced in the mirror. "She tried the staff door," he said once he swore in. Calm voice, the kind that's built cases for years. No credentials. Got loud. Claimed she was important. "I use minimal force for officer safety." Minimal force. I can still hear the word minimal dragging its feet across the floor. Judge Whitaker glanced at me. "Name Naomi Pierce." My voice echoed just enough to make someone in the back row sit up. Dwyer smiled small and smug. "She also said she works here." I asked permission to retrieve my identification from personal effects. Whitaker nodded. The bailiff brought my wallet, the leather folder I've carried since my first swearing in. I flipped it open, and the gold seal of the United States Judiciary caught the light like a flare on open water. The room changed temperature. Bell's pen stopped. Ortiz stared at his shoes. Whitaker took off his glasses and cleaned them slow, the way folks do when they need a second to admit they misread the whole scene. "Your Honor," I said, still cuffed, still calm, "I'd like to move for a recess. There appears to be a substantial misidentification." When the door closed behind us, Mr. Lang, the old bailiff with hands like oak, and a voice that could hush a storm, met me in the hallway with a garment bag. "I brought them," he whispered, eyes wet. Inside the robe, the gavel, the weight I'd earned one decision at a time. He'd kept them safe like something holy. "Are you going back in there?" he asked. "I am," I said, "but not where they left me." We didn't make an announcement. We didn't need a drum roll. When we came back, Lang opened the chamber door and simply said, "All rise." I walked past Dwyer without letting his face take up 1 inch of my focus, stepped behind the bench, and Judge Whitaker stood so quickly he almost knocked his chair over. "Thank you for covering my docket," I told him. "I'll take it from here." The room rose in one piece the way a tide lifts a shoreline. I set the gavel down and looked out at a sea of faces that had just watched a story flip in real time. "Officer Dwyer," and I said, "you may remain standing." He did, but the swagger was gone. Even a man who worships his own reflection knows when the light has changed. We didn't argue feelings. We walked through facts. Are you familiar, I asked, with Section 9.2 of the Courthouse Security Handbook, the one that permits judges to use any entrance, no screening required after the threats in Wasselma? He blinked. I don't recall. Understandable, I said, and handed Whitaker a laminated bulletin. Highlighted, signed by the chief administrator, reissued last spring. He read, nodded, the tip of his pen tapping the precise line. You said your body cam malfunctioned, I went on. Are you aware county cameras auto back up to the cloud every 45 seconds, regardless of local failure? The prosecutor started to object, stopped halfway, eyes on the clerk, hustling in a drive labeled Security Feed Cam, 6 Northeast Steps. We watched. The lobby microphones don't lie. Another one of those, Dwyer's voice crackled over speakers, and then the slap again, not louder, just undeniable. My hands never left the briefcase handle. I never raised my voice. I didn't resist. The gallery flinched anyway. Minimal force, I asked. He swallowed, said nothing. Officer Ortiz, I said, turning to the young man sitting rigid as a prayer. Your affidavit calls me erratic, profane, threatening. Would you like to revise it? He looked at the floor, then at the camera screen, then at me. Yes, Your Honor. And Officer Kellum. I asked the third man by the door, who'd been inching toward the hallway since the video started. Please remain within jurisdictional boundaries. This court may need your testimony shortly. He froze, exhaled, came back to his seat with both hands visible. Here's a thing about power. No one tells you it's quiet when it's real. When it's just for show, you get the shouting, the chest thumping. But when the truth is in the room, you can feel a string go taut from the ceiling to the floor, and it hums. For the record, I said, this footage wasn't a miracle. We requested preservation orders a month ago. We've been auditing patterns in this building, badge numbers, complaint rates, language in reports that always sounds the same, erratic, non-compliant, minimal force. I let the phrase sit where he'd have to see it. Officer Dwyer, do you know how many cases have turned on your testimony? He shook his head. You will, I said. We recessed with a directive that hit the room like winter pull, every case involving Dwyer and his unit for the last 5 years. People didn't cheer. They went to work. What followed wasn't television. It was worse and better. Boxes, spreadsheets, old files that smelled like dust and stubbornness. 400 plus names, some already home, some still waking to steal every morning. The Department of Justice sent over a team in quiet clothes and serious shoes. 12 officers tied to the unit were indicted in 2 weeks. 4 commanders retired with statements that tried to pretend they'd been in front of the parade the whole time. Emails disagreed. The day Dwyer came back to my courtroom, he wore orange. Shackles whisper when you move in them, not loud, just enough to remind you how quickly a life shrinks once the door clicks. I read 3 federal charges in a voice that didn't tremble: assault under color of law, falsifying official reports, deprivation of civil rights. 20 plus years on paper. He didn't ask for mercy. He looked hollow, like a man who'd been living in a house he thought he owned and finally saw the deed. Maybe you want fireworks here. You want me to tell you the gallery clapped that I gave a speech about justice rolling down like water. I didn't. No one applauded. Lang didn't smile. The court reporter wiped her eyes, then kept typing. It wasn't a victory lap, it was a repair shop, and the line was out the door. The city changed in small, stubborn ways. We rewrote the camera policy, no pause button, no delete, every upload auto-reviewed by a rotating civilian board you can't buy lunch for. Bias training isn't a slideshow anymore. It's a room where you read your own reports out loud and sit in the silence after. People actually came to the meetings, custodians, teachers, a teenager who asked me what to do when cops make you feel small. I told him the truth. I wish someone told me sooner: document, don't escalate, and if nobody listens, you keep speaking anyway, because silence is the soil this stuff grows in. Not all the change had my name on it. A clerk named Alana Price, 22, and quiet as a library, watched me walk back behind the bench that first day, and something in her straightened. She started law school at night, passed the bar with notes in the margins of her life, and brought me 3 pro bono cases from the Dwyer list, her initials printed so carefully on the first page, you could feel the tremor. I just wanted to say thank you, she told me in the hallway, holding out those files like a bouquet. I told her she was the thank you. Months later, they bolted a new plaque on the stone by the steps. Not my name, the building's a small line beneath it that says, "Here the record matters." Folks take pictures with it, sure, but my favorite thing is watching defendants look judges in the eye and judges actually listen. The marble didn't change. The air did. People ask if I'm proud. The honest answer is yes, and I'm tired. Not the kind sleep fixes. The kind you carry in your bones when you've spent a career telling the system to look at itself. I remember every bruise that healed under makeup faster than a calendar could mark it. I remember the way the room froze when I set the gavel down and told a man who saw me as a problem he was finally going to meet the truth. I remember that first slap and how somehow it knocked the dust off a lot more than my own morning. But here's the part that gets folks arguing in the comments, and I'm okay with that. If I'd walked in that day wearing my robe, none of this happens. I'd flash the badge sale through to sip my coffee upstairs, and Dwyer would still be writing minimal force for the next kid who looked like me minus a law degree. So tell me, does justice need the robe, or does it need the risk the walk through the door as just another person with a to-do list and a heartbeat? I'm not here to preach. I am, however, asking you to talk to me down there. Tell me if you think the cameras are enough, if the badge is the problem, or the person behind it, if you've seen a room flip because one stubborn fact refused to shut up. Drop your city, your courthouse story the moment you decided you weren't crazy for wanting better. And if you believe the record should outlive the rumor, hit subscribe, share this with someone who still thinks minimal force sounds gentle, and I'll see you in the comments where the real cross-examination starts.